Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. Listener discretion is advised. Charm City Paranormal is a paranormal investigation team based out of Baltimore, Maryland. They take their viewers around the country exploring haunted locations to better understand the various aspects of the paranormal and uncover interesting stories of spirits and entities that dwell within. They combine classic point-of-view found footage paranormal videos with cinematic visuals and rich historical background to each location. And I've got Mike from Charm City Paranormal on the podcast today to help explain all of it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Caught on the Mic. Ladies and gentlemen, you know that I do not shy away from this topic whatsoever. I have had UFC fighters on my show. I've had musicians on my show. I've had doctors, lawyers, scientists, and everything of the like on my show, some of my best friends. But a topic I commonly circle back to is the unknown, things that we don't understand, things we can't explain, the paranormal. I love it. My favorite time of year is coming up. I've said this before. July 5th, the day after the 4th of July, is the start of Halloween season for me and any rational-minded adult. And with me today is Mike from Charm City Paranormal. How the heck are you, man?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Well, you're about to get into spooky season. Is that when things get a little bit busier for you?
No, sir. Spooky season is year-round for me.
I absolutely love that. So without any further ado, why don't I just hand it over to you, introduce yourself to my audience, and talk about what it is that you do.
So my name is Mike. I'm the creator of Charm City Paranormal. I started this project back in summer of 2020, shortly after the pandemic. I got laid off from my job. My business shut down. I was originally in IT prior to switching over to YouTube. And really the project just started out as sort of like a passionate hobby and a way to explore creative freedom. And it wasn't even meant to be paranormal. It was actually supposed to be urban exploration. And I went into a very, very haunted asylum here in my home state of Maryland. And the very first time I went to explore it during the day, I had a life-changing paranormal experience that I had never had prior. Scared the hell out of me. Didn't know what was happening, but that curiosity sort of overrode the fear. And I really just wanted to make sense of that day. And ever since then, I have just gone all over the country, exploring various haunted places, asylums, hospitals, homes, you name it, trying to make sense of that day and to validate not only my experiences, but the experiences of others.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I love that. And going to your channel on YouTube, there is something very different about the content that you create that I notice is that it's a lot more of a cinematic experience. Was that intentional?
No, not at all. Actually, when I started creating content, originally I was trying to stick to the tried and true formula of like POV found footage style investigations, because that's what's most popular. And that's what seems to be taken as authentic online. You know, when you see these high budget or high quality investigations, a lot of the times people think that it's just for entertainment purposes. And I didn't want to be perceived that way. So for the longest time, I was just doing bare bones, raw, minimal editing, minimal cuts, and just showing a true investigation. And after a while, I noticed that the comments and the feedback that I was getting from people was pretty much the same. You know, this is very honest, genuine investigations. I really like what you're doing. And I thought to myself, why do I have to stick to the same formula that everybody else is doing in order for this to be successful? Like, why can't I have fun with it and create cinematic, engaging content that you would see in a low budget movie or on TV or whatever, and it also be a genuine investigation. So I kind of said to hell with it, and I decided to have fun with the editing and try to create this sort of mashup of like cinematic B-roll mixed with real POV investigations.
Were you a believer before you started this? Because I know the process of belief can be like a game of dodgeball, But
Oh, yeah.
Would you consider yourself a believer before you started doing this?
I would say I was a hardcore skeptic. I
Yeah.
didn't not believe, but I had never been in a situation or presented with something that could change that belief. I wasn't really invested into the paranormal growing up or really at any point in my life up until that day. I worked in IT for 12 years in a professional capacity and 15 to 16 years just in general. So I had my world. It was computers. If it wasn't computers, I was going to metal shows. So I had my little bubble that I was in. Paranormal was absolutely the last thing on my mind. So it's not that I didn't believe, it's just nobody had ever really presented anything to me to make me think, there is a possibility that this exists. It was sort of thrown at me in a way that I just couldn't ignore it. And then I did my research, and it turns out there's this massive community of people that are involved in this. And there's tons of people going out and investigating, creators, all this stuff. So I got sucked in right away.
Yes. Do you find that being involved with the periphery of that community, you are fighting people that are skeptical at all?
No, I would say definitely in the beginning, it was like I had my experiences and I believed in them so profoundly that, nobody could change my mind about that. And if you didn't believe it, I wasn't offended by that or anything, but I took it with a grain of salt. And now it's gotten to that point 3 years later. I've had so many experiences and I've had so many people reach out to me telling me that I have validated their experiences, that regardless if you believe in it or not, I know what's real. I know what's real for me. I'll do my best to convince you or at least try to change your mind, but I'm not going to force anything on you. If you choose not to believe, then that's on you.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the places that you have done investigations. If you had to pick one that was a personal favorite, which one was it and where was it?
That would have to be Forest Haven for sure. That is the place that got Charm City Paranormal started. That's where I had my very first real paranormal experience. And really, that is the place that changed all of this for me. Going back to what I said earlier about this being sort of like a passionate hobby, it wasn't until I started doing numerous investigations at Forest Haven and later on finding out that I have an attachment and helping that attachment cross over, it was like, okay, my purpose in this is far different than what I had started it for. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not doing this just to get device responses or get noises on camera or get views. Like, I have a purpose in this now that far outweighs anything that I thought it was for. And Forest Haven is easily, to me, one of the most haunted places that I've ever been to. Just a little backstory on it. It was a mental health asylum that opened up in 1925 in Laurel, Maryland. And it was built as a sort of like a colonial cottage style settlement. And patients there were taught basic labor skills, farming, cooking, sewing, things like that. And it was meant to give them sort of like a sense of community while also establishing independence. That's what was put on paper.
Sure.
If anybody knows anything about these asylums and their history, none of these places were ever designed or intended to help people. That was just a front. But that was the story of Forest Haven. Within a matter of like 3 years, it completely declined. They were reporting patient deaths within the first like 14 months of the place opening. By the 5th year, they had already buried close to 100 people. Overall, 387 documented deaths were recorded on the property. And there were only 1,200 patients, giving it a 1 in 3 mortality rate. It was listed as one of the deadliest institutions in United States history, and it was only open for 66 years. It was one of the shortest lived facilities, too. Countless horror stories have come out of that place. People being tied to cribs, tied to toilets, tied to beds, just horrible, horrible stuff happen to these people. And when you go there, you feel that energy. I mean, the minute you walk into any one of these buildings, you just get this. Some people are more receptive to it than others, but I have taken complete skeptics and non-believers to this place, and they have left changed people. It's a universal feeling there. It's so heavy. I've noticed even in the summertime, when you go there, it could be 90 degrees and you get to the property, and I swear it feels like it's 10 degrees colder there. I don't know why. I can't explain it. If you look at it on a map, all of Forest Haven, the woods around it are dead. And then as soon as you get just outside of the property line, all the vegetation is growing again. It's just around Forest Haven where everything is dead. It's a very, very strange place. It's the stuff of nightmares, but easily one of the most haunted, completely changed my life. Anybody listening to this, if you look into Forest Haven, you will probably get as obsessed with it as I did.
So if you were to break down the brass tacks of an attachment, because you mentioned that earlier and how now you kind of have a personal attachment to that specific facility, explain it to me as if I were a kindergartner. Like, what do you mean by that?
So I still don't have a full understanding of it because I have only talked to a handful of people about it, and they have explained it to me in just a very basic way. So I will try to reiterate that as best as I can, just from what I understand. But basically, it's believed that we're all souls having a human experience, that, you know, when we all leave our physical bodies, those that do believe go somewhere else, or that we are forms of energy, and energy doesn't die. It just simply changes states. There's a couple of books and other things that I've read that have kind of talked about this theory of like having free will in life and death, and people not choosing to move on because of either fear of what waits for them on the other side there, or unfinished business, things like that. I think that for me, my theory on this is that energy gets stuck in places, which it's not really my theory. This is a universal theory, but my belief is that energy gets stuck in places, whether it be people, thought forms, you know, non-human things, whatever it may be. And because we're energy and we radiate different types of energy, whether that be light energy, dark, whatever, I think we attract those things to us. And if it's something that matches or aligns with our energy and it feels safe or comforted by that, it's going to come back with us. And some people, I feel, are way more receptive to that than others. Because for somebody who started out as a skeptic, and, you know, my entire life was built around IT, logic, you know, rationalizing, making conclusions to things, having explanations, science, all that stuff. And then to have a life-changing experience and go from that to now like seeing things out of the corners of my eyes and hearing people when they're not there, and, you know, having devices go off in my house when I set them up. I think it's entirely possible for people to shift their energy and their beliefs, which will in turn kind of show to that side. So I think they see what they want to see. And if they like what they see, they're going to come back with us, in which case, why I got an attachment.
So Johnny Hauser, friend of mine, he takes care of the Villisca Axe Murder House, which we're going to talk about here in a few minutes. One of the things that we discussed in episode 2 of this podcast was how we have an influence on some of the energies that present themselves in haunted or paranormal like location, almost like we're an amplifier to a certain extent. Is that something that you have felt over the past 3 years while doing your investigations?
Absolutely. When I started doing this, I would barely get anything from investigations. I would get stuff, EVPs, occasional K2 responses, REM pod, things like that, but not in the capacity that we get things now. And it's because of my mindset and the way that I shifted my beliefs and my intent and what I'm doing. I'm a firm believer in getting what you give. And if the Axe House is a prime example of getting the haunting that you want, and Johnny has explained it countless times perfectly. Like, you're going to get the haunting that you ask for when it comes to this place. If you want to talk to the kids and you put that energy and that intention out, you're probably going to get that. If you want to harass the killer or talk to the angry spirit that's there, you're going to get that. In our case, we harassed the angry spirit while we were there because we drove 25 hours across the country to go to this place. And halfway through the drive, I'm like, we're getting something. We're going to get something. We got way more than we could have ever asked for. And it's because of the intention that we had when we walked into the building. So I think, yeah, if you're looking for positive energy, if you're looking for a positive experience to talk to something that is friendly and wants to interact with you, if you put that out there, there's a good chance you might get it. Whereas if you want demons and anger and monsters and evil, nasty things and low energy, if you believe in that and you put the intention out there, you're probably going to get that too.
Yeah, I think that's actually something that exists in life as well. You know,
Oh, yeah.
manifest destiny is a real thing in life and death. Let's talk specifically about your trip to Villisca, Iowa, and the Villisca Axe Murder House. Give us an overview of what that experience is like, because I know my audience is invested in that.
Axe House was actually an accident. I was originally going out to Edinburgh. I think I'm saying that right. Edinburgh. I know it's different in the States. There's a place out there called Edinburgh Manor, and it's in Monticello, Iowa.
Okay.
Iowa's towns are hard to pronounce. But I saw that place on YouTube through a couple of different investigators, and they were getting crazy evidence. Like, just at that point in time in my investigative career, I had never seen anything like I saw at Edinburgh Manor. So the person I was working with at the time, I reached out to him and I said, let's go do this place. And he mentioned, well, Axe House is only like 2 or 3 hours west of Edinburgh. Why don't we go there too? I had never even heard of the Axe House up until this point, because again, I was still so new. I think this was our first year as investigators. So we're still brand new, learning about locations and things like that. And I looked at it online very briefly, read the backstory, and I was like, sure, let's do it. About 2 weeks, 3 weeks leading up to the actual investigation, I started doing more research on it, looking at videos online, reading about the case. I'm like, man, this is serious. Like, this is way heavier than I ever thought it would be. So leading up to it, I'm getting anxious and wondering just what's going to happen when we get out there, because I've heard all these stories of demons and scratches and attachments and this guy who stabbed himself. And it's like, I don't know what to expect. Is this stuff really going to happen to us? We get out there and we met up with Johnny probably like 5:30 p.m. And it was in the middle of the summer, so there were still hours before the sun even went down. We're getting the tour of the house, and I'm sure you've heard other people say this. There's times where you can walk into a place and it just hits you immediately. Like, all the hair on your body stands up and you get this just heavy feeling. I didn't get that when I walked in. When I walked into the Axe House for the very first time, nothing. It just felt like an old little historical home. You would have never, in my mind, I would have never suspected that 8 people were murdered in this home. It just looked like something that was being preserved by the town. Johnny gives us the walkthrough and the tour. We talk for a bit afterwards. He leaves. And we actually didn't even start the investigation until almost 9 or 10 p.m.
Right.
So we had several hours of buffer time, just like shooting B-roll and photos and hanging out at the house. As soon as we start the investigation, almost the minute that we kind of like make contact with whatever is there, stuff just starts getting super weird. My headspace is getting weird. My friend's headspace is getting weird. We had to keep going outside like every 15 to 20 minutes because it would just get so overwhelming. And it was mainly the emotional and psychological aspect of that house. A lot of people think that when you describe stuff like this, you're seeing actual monsters or full ghosts or like just crazy theatrical Hollywood stuff that you see in the movies. But it's so psychologically manipulative. And that house, whatever is there, I really believe that it's been there longer than the house. I don't think it was even from the house or on the land. I think there's something there that it travels through, because it knew things about me and the other guy that I was investigating with that neither one of us knew about each other. Like, it said his deceased best friend's name almost to the day a year after it had happened, and it was right after he taunted him. He was calling him like a coward and pathetic and all this stuff, and then it said his deceased best friend's name like in full, and it sounded like his friend, and it fucked him up. Like, it was bad. Like, he was he was like, I got to go outside, have a smoke. Like, I need to process this. And there was just so many times throughout the night where I was catching myself feeling things and thinking things that didn't feel like they were mine. I like to think of myself as a pretty calm, reserved person. I don't really get worked up or angry about a lot of things. I just live and let live. But the littlest things that were happening that night were just setting me off for no reason. And I was getting just so angry. I'd walk outside. Within 10 minutes, it was gone. I was fine. I'd go back in the house. 10 or 15 minutes later, I have this like uncontrollable rage. And the other guy I was working with, he was just sad the whole time. Like he said, he felt uncontrollable sadness and he wanted to cry his eyes out the whole time he was there. It just messes with you in a way that I don't think any other investigation could, because it's so mental. And like 6 months after, I want to say 6 to 8 months after that investigation, I was having horrible nightmares, like vivid, lucid nightmares, trapped in them. And I'm like, I'm not going to go into the detail of them, but it's stuff that like horror movies would take inspiration from,
Right.
probably banned in theaters, just really bad. And like, I think Johnny actually talked about this at one point because he told me, I don't know if it was in our video, but I know he's talked about this before. I know he said he had to stop investigating that house because he started having thoughts that weren't his. And he was having like violent thoughts towards loved ones and friends and family members and isolating himself. The same thing happened to me after I left there. And it happened for, like I said, about 6 to 8 months. I was isolating myself, like wouldn't leave the house, wouldn't talk to my friends, wouldn't go out, getting into fights with family for no reason. And then it like just kind of went away one day. But that place has left its mark on me. I don't think anything will ever come close to it. I've been to at least close to 100 places at this point. The Axe House still sits at the top of my list as the most haunted and the scariest place that I've ever been to.
Ah. So are you of the belief that maybe it was a spiritual conduit before the axe murders took place, and maybe that's what influenced that crime to happen?
There is a very good chance. There's a belief that mental illness, or at least mentally unstable people, are more susceptible to darker energies.
Yeah.
Because they already have less control over their own thoughts and autonomy. So it's easier for some outside or external influence to take over. The preacher, I can't remember his name, but he was already known in town to be kind of like off a little bit.
Yeah.
Kind of mentally unstable. So it wouldn't surprise me if, the belief in lower energies taking over people like that is true, if that actually happened. And plus he confessed to it, and the town just wrote it off because they're like, oh, he's kind of weird. He's a little off anyways. The man literally admitted it. And they're like, no, you didn't. Like, what more proof do you need?
Right.
You had a suspect. You could have closed the case and at least ended it. But I think whatever was there, either it was there before the house was even built, and it's just been kind of wandering that area. Maybe somebody brought it in.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows, but it's got to be old for it to know things about people that it's never met. It's traveling, it's going around, it's learning things about people. So yeah, it's got to be hundreds, maybe even thousands of years old.
Yeah, this is a good point to interject an editorial footnote for anybody that's listening to this podcast. Go back on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on after this episode is over, and I highly encourage you to listen to episode 2 of Caught on the Mic. I actually recorded that episode inside the Villisca Axe Murder House, and you can have a little bit of history, basically, of what Mike and I are discussing right here. So you've said that your more recent investigations have been a little bit closer to home. Let's talk about that, and let's talk about some of the things that you're currently getting excited about.
Yeah, we just started hitting a bunch of Maryland locations this year. I brought on 2 new members to Charm City Paranormal, David and Matt. I met David about a year or 2 ago. He runs another paranormal group. We worked together at the Grand Midway Hotel in Pennsylvania. Went super well, stayed in touch for a while. And eventually I just kind of threw the idea out there. Hey, I'm looking for more people. If you want to join us. He gave it some thought, decided to join on. He's from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and he works for a big chain of restaurants. So he meets all kinds of people all the time, and they all know what he does. So he's constantly getting information about new houses and businesses, and he's basically like our outreach, where I handle like all the editing and stuff. He talks to people, sets up the investigations. So he's been the one actually helping out with all of these like local Maryland investigations. And we got a hit on this farmhouse probably 6 months ago. Just this little farmhouse out on the peninsula, near Tillman Island, and it sits like middle of nowhere. You have to drive down like a 2-mile long dirt road and get on this tiny little skinny stretch of land surrounded by water, and it's just this one little farmhouse on an island. And when you look at it, you think, yeah, this could be haunted. You go in, you don't feel anything, you don't see anything. It feels very cozy and comfortable. And the first 2 times that we investigated that place, we really didn't get much. Like, we had device responses and some things here and there, but nothing that was making sense. We went back again, did an Estes method upstairs in the bedroom. There's like 2 bedrooms. It's an old farmhouse, so they have like the servants' rooms and the servant stairs and things like that.
Right.
We were in the one room on the one end of the house near the servant stairs, and David was all the way on the opposite end of the house. We had a camera facing down the hallway. In the middle of the Estes session, one of the doors opens. Like, you see the knob turn on camera and open. Freaked us out. Funny enough, that door actually opened while the cameras weren't rolling, and I watched it happen, and I was like, shit. David's like, it'll happen again. And I'm like, well, I really appreciate your confidence, but I doubt that we're going to catch something like that again. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, it happens again.
Oh, wow.
And we got it on camera, so it's in the video. But that little gem of a farmhouse, I never suspected anything from it. And it turns out that we talked to a 16-year-old soldier that fought in the War of 1812 named Morris. He was from the UK. He sailed over, fought in the war. That's all we had. And we're like, this is crazy. We had so many different confirmations that it was Morris and what he was saying was true. Anybody listening, if you go to my channel, it's the Haunted Farmhouse video. It's one of the best videos we've ever created. It's so direct and so consistent with everything that's been asked, and just throughout that whole case, everything lines up perfectly. That place turned out to be an absolute gem. Loved it. We decided we want to hit more Maryland spots, because Maryland is the 7th colony out of the 13 original colonies. This place was founded in mid 1600s. It's old as shit. Like, it's so old, and there's so much history, and very important history here, that just doesn't get talked about in the paranormal. There's no like Maryland teams really pushing Maryland haunted history, at least to the scale that we're trying to do it. So a few months go by, we get another hit on another location that's 30 minutes north of this house. It's called the Galley of St. Michael's, and it's in this little town. It's called St. Michael's. It used to be a boating, like, it was like a port for them to build boats. And I think it was a major vessel, or like a boating vessel for, I think they were called Baltimore Clippers. And they were really fast boats that could outmaneuver most ships during that time. And the British knew about this. They came to St. Michael's with the intent to burn it down. The legend is that all the townspeople hung lanterns in like trees and overtopped their homes to confuse the British. So when they fired at the town, they fired over the houses. And I think only 2 cannonballs hit one or 2 buildings, one of which the cannonball hole is still in the door to this day.
Oh, wow.
But super historical place, really cool backstory. The lady that owns the galley told us that, she gave us the rundown of the experiences that she was having, the paranormal activity and hearing things, seeing things, the feelings, the sensations. And we're like, cool. When I go into an investigation, I have no expectations to ever capture anything. I just walk in and I'm like, hey, I'm here. If you want to talk, cool. If not, that's fine too. And we just kind of sit and wait. And the galley, when you first go in there, you think like, what's really here? Like, it could probably be like a mouse or compressors clicking, or you walk by the AC. It doesn't feel haunted. Man, that is the most direct, clear, intelligent spirit communication that we have ever filmed,
Oh, wow.
ever. And it ties back to the farmhouse. I don't want to spoil it because I don't want to, I want you to, if you haven't seen it yet, get the chance to watch it. But we were getting so much information from the galley that tied back to the farmhouse and Morris months after we had been there.
Oh, wow.
And it's so crazy because these places are 30 minutes apart from each other. There's no connection between the two. You have a restaurant in St. Michael's and then some random little farmhouse on a peninsula. Why would those be connected? And it's like when I was watching this footage and editing it and getting all these responses and everything that was happening, I'm just like, holy shit. No, how is anybody? I don't believe this. And I was there and I'm the one editing it. And I cannot believe what we captured. It is just insane. And it's all local places. It's all spots from Maryland.
And that doesn't surprise me. I guess when I think about the paranormal, for whatever reason, my mind always does drift off to the first 13 colonies, as you mentioned, and the northeast portion of the United States. And maybe that's just because of the historical knowledge we all have. Like, it's great that we found a new world at some point in time, but there was some pretty heinous shit that went down in the discovery of the new world.
Oh yeah.
So you're talking about manifesting negative energy. There's a lot of negative energy that was manifested in discovery. You know, you think of the Salem witch trials and, you know, haunted locations throughout Boston, and like it's pretty crazy. So I guess that lends to another question. Do you feel that the Northeast is a larger conduit as opposed to any other place in the United States?
Yes and no. Sure. I mean, we landed here first. All of our beginning history was established here on the East Coast, and then it spread out to the Midwest and eventually the West over time. But I think it's a combination of history and collective belief in people. Because if you go to places like the Midwest, upper Midwest, lower Midwest, or whatever, people believe in ghosts all over the world. Like, I'm not trying to section anybody out or make exceptions for anybody, but I know that the belief is far stronger in certain demographics than others. You know, like if you go down far south, like Bible Belt area, they believe in some sort of holy or like spiritual presence, but it's God related. Like, talking to the dead is evil and it's demonic and necromancy and things like that. So they tend to stay away from it. And whereas you come up to a place like the Northeast, Maryland, Pennsylvania, things like that, people are hardcore believers up here. And you have tons of teams and investigative groups and events and things centered around the paranormal. And I think that collective focus and energy being put into that, on top of it already being haunted as shit here, amplifies that. So yes and no. I think it really just depends on where you go and how strongly the community around you believes in things.
Now, throughout your investigations as Charm City Paranormal, have you ever leveraged the assistance of a medium, a psychic, somebody that dabbles in tarot or anything along those lines, to see if they could be another conduit of energy for you?
Yeah, actually, the two mediums that helped me cross Clarabelle over, JD and Lisa, they were a huge proponent in me even figuring out that I had an attachment, that there was this dark energy or entity at Forest Haven. And I've had another tarot reader who is also named Lisa give me incredible insight into my life, the things going on around me, and the experiences that I've had with the paranormal that has more or less guided me in this direction to where I'm at today. Like, I don't think, like, there's a handful of things that I can think of between when I started in May of 2020 and now that are a huge reason for me to continue. And the psychics that I've worked with are like right at the top of that list.
That leads into my next question almost perfectly. What is something that you know now that you wish you knew when you started out?
To be patient and to have a truly open, unbiased mindset when it comes to doing this stuff. I went into this with a ton of preconceived notions and expectations as to what I thought the paranormal was, just based off of the media that was available, based off of research that I had done. You know, when you have these massive creators with hundreds of thousands or millions of followers pushing this content, you're obviously going to go to them first because you see the numbers and you think, well, if all these people like this, then this is the source that I need to go to. And a lot of it is, like, no disrespect to what anybody's doing, a lot of it is just sensationalized and entertainment. And that, to me, in my mind, I was like, okay, I need to be that way in order to get results and reactions like this, because they're doing it and look at all this crazy stuff that's happening to them. Switching it up to being a patient, calm person and just treating it like I'm on the lake fishing has brought me infinitely more satisfaction and better results than the opposite, being impatient and just being like, come on, touch this device.
That makes sense. Content creation at large is starting to be a crowded space. And so those differentiators like authenticity, high quality video, high quality audio, those are huge. How will you continue to differentiate your investigation from anybody else's moving forward?
When I started this, it was all based off of authenticity and validating my experiences. I had no intention of even creating content. It was, again, just a very passionate hobby and a way to explore creative freedoms. And I had a full-time career. You know, I was working in IT. I had my future was essentially secured. So I had no reason to leave that. And for the first 2.5 years doing this, my numbers weren't anything to brag about. You know, I was maybe 300 or 400 views on a video, less than 1,000 subscribers, was making zero money off of this. I was just doing it for fun. Every time I got to the point to where I wanted to either take a very long break or quit, something would happen to kind of push me a little bit more. And they're like, no. And that, to me, is like that's my spiritual belief kicking in, is like, yes, something is at work here that is beyond my comprehension, that is keeping me going, because I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't. And one day it just kind of took off. I woke up to, I think I went from like 3,000 to 10,000 in a couple hours on YouTube. And then it just kept going up, and it went to 50,000 in like 2-3 weeks. And I thought to myself, clearly what I'm doing is working. I don't need to change anything about what I'm doing. Maybe, like, obviously there's always room for improvement and growth. I always want to learn how to shoot better B-roll or get this shot right or get that lighting right, whatever. There's always little nitpick things. But as far as the foundation of the content, I really don't need to change anything, because this is what people want. They want an honest investigation to see what it's really like, but to also be entertained without all the theatrics and all the bullshit that goes on.
Right.
So yeah, I think just keeping the formula, like I finally found my formula as far as how I want to present it. I think just sticking with that and remaining integral and true to the work is really what is going to keep this going. Because if you think about it, paranormal content more or less is timeless. Like, you could fire up Ghost Adventures 50 years from now and it will still be entertaining. I don't care who you are or what you have to say about them. I will watch Ghost Adventures when I'm 80 years old. I'm 28 now. It's timeless. So for me, I want to create something that I'm not only proud of, but will be timeless. And I can look back on 20 or 30 or 40 years from now and look at it as an accomplishment.
Yes. You seem pretty firm in a lot of sense of self-actualization. So outside of this investigations, this content that you're creating, what inspires you in life, in your day-to-day life?
Hardworking people. Seeing people that are doing what I'm doing or doing similar things and working even harder than me. I'm really big about not being the smartest person in the room. If anything, I like being the dumbest person in the room, because that's how I learn and that's how I grow as an individual. I'm very fascinated in just hardworking, dedicated people who have multiple outlets for their creativity or their work that they're doing. I am always inspired by my friends and just seeing how hard they work and what dedication that they put into their craft. And it makes me want to continue more. It's not even so much as like a competition thing. It's just like, damn, you're doing this. Like now I want to do it because I can see that it's possible.
I think there's a lot of value in that not enough people are humble enough to admit or accept, is that you can borrow little things from all the people around you to make yourself better. Humanized Voltron, if you will, or Megazord.
I like that.
So what is a place that you haven't investigated yet that you're looking forward to or you have your sights set on?
100% Sally House. I want to go there just because of everything that I've seen about it. I want to see it for myself. I'm very much a see it to believe it kind of person. Huge reason why I even got started in the paranormal. And I see so many videos about that place and how insane it is. And there's a little demon girl there and all this other stuff. And it's like, cool, but I don't believe it until I see it.
Right. For my listeners, explain what Sally House is.
Sally House is a house in Atchison, Kansas, and it was originally a doctor's office. It was like a small medical practitioner's office, and he lived there. And the story is none of this has been proven or claimed factual. There isn't even documentation to back this up. This is just the story that has been echo chambered forever about this house. But apparently a woman, just paraphrasing, took her daughter there. She was having some kind of health issue. I think her gallbladder was like ruptured, or she had something to where she needed some kind of like major invasive surgery, or she was going to die. And she was very young and she didn't want to do it. But the doctor ended up putting her on a table without anesthesia, just like very minimal painkillers, and ended up doing this super invasive procedure, which killed her. And now her spirit supposedly wanders the house and is extremely vengeful and angry and violent. She was very young, I think between the ages of like 5 and 8. But that's the backstory on it. I don't know how true it is.
Oh, wow.
This just ties back into, again, the power of collective belief and thought, that if enough people believe that there's a demon there and put in their mind that there's a demon here, I'm going to talk to a demon while they're in the house, who's to say that they don't create some kind of egregore or thought form or even invoke something there from the collective energy? So who knows?
So on the topic of collective consciousness, this is my usual wrap-up question that I love people to answer from all walks of life. What is your advice for making the world a better place tomorrow than what it is today?
As short and simple as I can make it, be the example and the change that you want to see around you. Instead of complaining or criticizing or condemning the negative thoughts, actions, or words of people around you, internalize it, make a mental note that you don't want to be that way. And instead of preaching or virtue signaling, just live by example, because people will follow it. I can speak from experience personally that by living by an example and showing people how you want to see the world, they will follow suit. It always starts in little trickles. People are so focused on trying to change the whole world at once when they don't realize that they can do it every single day just by the little tiny things that they do. Smiling at the cashier, holding the door open for somebody, paying somebody's meal forward, just little things, little actions like that have a ripple effect. And you'd be surprised at how much you can change around you just by leading by example.
It ties into everything that we've just discussed. Positive energy, negative energy, getting back what you put out in the world. Mike, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I would love to have you on the show anytime again in the future. If you have any ideas or anything, feel free to hit me up. I'm glad we're friends now, man.
Dude, please. This was great. I loved talking to you, man. This was probably the easiest conversation I think I've ever had with anybody. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, stay in touch.
This is awesome. Thanks for doing the show, man. The world's a better place with you in it.
Thank you, man.
Once again, I want to thank my friend Mike from Charm City Paranormal for doing the show today. If you get a chance, go to www.charmcityparanormal.com or search out Charm City Paranormal on YouTube. Give them a follow. Great content, great investigations. I cannot wait to see where he goes next with all of it. And if you're being generous with the social media follows, make sure you follow Caught on the Mic on all social media platforms, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Threads, on Twitter, and on TikTok. You can also find me at www.caughtonthemic.com for all past episodes and future news. This has been Caught on the Mic with Michael Clark. I'm Michael Clark. Until next time, thank you.